Good evening. I'm Milton Curry, Dean of the USC School of Architecture in the Della and Harry McDonald Dean's Chair in Architecture, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the USC School of Architecture Spring Public Event Series. I know we're all virtual, but for me and for us in Los Angeles, it's a cool evening, made a little bit cooler by rain earlier today. So just to add a little bit of ambiance to where we are, and I hope that that you and yours are doing well wherever you are. Tonight, very pleased to welcome Professor Doreen Heng Liu to our school. It's a pleasure to welcome her and to have a discussion about the very interesting work that her firm executes and that she participates in her teaching at UC Berkeley and elsewhere. Architecture, art, landscape, and urbanism have often become fused, and in some cases the word infrastructure in fact intervenes to further connect or disrupt these disciplinary frames. And in fact, landscape urbanism and infrastructure as landscape have also become terminologies and embedded within ideologies of how we theorize and historicize and explain the contemporary context that we find ourselves in. Node Architecture and Urbanism, a multidisciplinary practice established by our lecture this evening, produces what I would say are projects and poetries that delicately balance the nuanced edges of disciplines and experiences. And I think maybe that's made more poignant or ever more poignant by Professor Liu's experiences and abilities and capacities to tap into artistic practices for spatial tools that can be used to enhance her firm's projects in landscape, architecture, and urban design and art. Doreen Heng Liu, a Chinese architect born in Guangzhou, received her Master of Architecture from UC Berkeley in 1994 and a Doctorate of Design at Harvard Graduate School of Design in 2008. In 2004, she established her own design practice, Node Architecture and Urbanism, in Nansha and Hong Kong, and then relocated to Shenzhen in 2009. For years, Node has been a leading diverse architecture, urbanism, art, and design practice very active in the South China region. And as one of the leading independent offices in China, Node focuses on architecture and urban design while extending its practices to art installation and landscape architecture. Over the years, the firm has been adhering to the research and practices of the fundamental architectural issues in pursuing innovation and innovatively designed projects based on experimentation and rigorous design methodologies. Meanwhile, Node also explores the cross-disciplinary openness and compatibility in architectural concepts and takes it as the point of departure for design strategies. In recent years, the firm particularly has been interested in the cross-disciplinary research and architectural making in the fields of public space, infrastructure, urban regeneration, and cultural, artistic, and academic buildings. Inspired by the interaction and stimulation among different fields, Node tries to keep a visionary and experimental perspective on the domain of architecture. Please join me in welcoming Doreen Heng Liu to USC Architecture.
Thank you very much, Professor Milton. It's very kind, very nice introduction. I'm very honored to be here. So Milton, shall I start right now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just share screen. Can everybody see it? Yes. Maybe I will. Can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes, as Milton has just introduced, actually my firm, I was born in Guangzhou in the Pearl River Delta, and then I went to North for my basic bachelor education. Then in the 90s, I went to the Bay Area for my graduate programs in UC Berkeley. And then I came back, I got an invitation from Hong Kong and worked in the Pearl River Delta for more than 7 or 8 years. And then I just at the point, I think I should expand my understanding about the city and my own practice. So I should take a further my study in the US. So I went to Harvard for my DDS program. So I got my degree in the 2008. I come back. So it's just very brief my experience. So today my lecture. So mostly my time, even though I work in the US and in the Europe for more than 5 years, but most my practice is in the South China. So today my topic is from infant structure to infant architecture. Mainly is introduce my office recent works. I should divide it. My talk today is the first part and second part. The first part is mainly address where I'm coming from and where my practice has been positioned, and then how the outcome out of my understanding about the region and the current development in China. And then second part I would like to introduce mainly is the past 2 weeks, past two years project on the infrastructure project, because that's maybe both my academic and my practice has been really focused on. As you know, the Pearl River Delta, it's a large area. Yeah, it's 56,000 square meters of appearance. So mainly more or less like Holland, the size, but the population is more than 4 times larger than Holland. So this is the really high density region. So where I'm coming from actually is the middle of Guangzhou in the Pearl River Delta, and then my early practice is in Nansha and the red dot in the middle. And later on, when I got my doctorate degree, I came back and teaching was in the Chinese University of Hong Kong for more than 10 years. So I live, and my family is also in Hong Kong. But since a lot of projects right now in China, so mainly is in mainland. So I set up my my office physically, the space in Shenzhen these days. It's just a city next to Hong Kong. When I talk about my practice in China, so I have to start with where I'm coming from, where I'm, my practice has just started. So as what I said, when I came back from my Berkeley study, I got an invitation from my Hong Kong developer. So the Henry Ford Group. So they set up my office actually is told me I have to develop a new city in Nansha. So it's just a city in the middle of the Pearl River Delta. Actually, is at that time in the mid 90s when I came back, is the land like this. So it's a weakened. No, it's an empty and the void of land. So it's a land to get a lot of reclamation ready for development. So so this is the most of the cities in the early development of a Pearl River Delta. So all like this, water, reclamation land, and then the mountains is probably a lot of a quarry industry at that time. So it's a virgin land ready for development. And then at the time when I came in, that's a Henry Ford on the left hand. So he's the person hiring me in directly from the United States. Because since, when I was working in San Francisco, mostly my projects very small. So it's like 100 square meters, even that's large. So mostly it's the tenant improvement work. So at that time, the developer told me, so, I give you a new city, the city of 22 square kilometers to develop. It's nothing there. So just coming back, and then you have a lot to design. So it's when I come here, it's the first master plan was developed by Ricardo Bofill in 1993. So when I coming in, the first set of a master plan was already set up. So I work actually, the first several years, my work or my practice in Nansha, it's very refreshing. It's a totally the dream as a young architect. At that time I only early 20s. So my first project is already 10,000 square meters of a science museum, from the middle of nowhere. I was very excited, and then I drop in a lot of what I learned in the U.S. And then a lot of modern elements. I am able to handle from the architecture, structure, and all the way to the interior, even the furniture. I'm able to really operate it by myself. So I only have a very small team of 2 or 3 people to execute the project from the very early schematic design all the way to the construction, because I'm also the client-based architect. So it seems at that time I have a lot of power to handle the situation. And also at this period of time, I'm able to work with several artists, because I was maybe that's a part of my US education is we come across a lot of disciplinaries, not only the architects, the related architecture related profession, but also the contemporary artists. And at that time was very active in the southern China as well. So for example, the clock, the installation actually is by one of my artists. So I just implement some of the artistic that kind of ideas into part of my architecture making at that time. So I have a totally the freedom to do it single-handed. For example, I also work with my classmate from Berkeley, Paul Andrews. Maybe you all know. Actually, now is quite a famous structure engineer in the Bay Area and architect. So he worked with me for the first project in China, on the cross span like 24 meters of that kind of the olive shape structures. And then I invite him to come here and make a one-to-one mock-up in the shipyard factory in order to make sure that it's the right for the place. Not only that, I have a lot of freedom to also programming my architecture. So, during the 90s, a very crazy period of time in the region is you have a lot of projects, everything goes so fast, but at the same time, you don't have enough people to work with. So as an architect, you have to work a lot from the very beginning, not only the schematic design, but you also have to design the program. For example, my boss just told me, we were going to build a new World Trade Center building in Nansha. So it's a 30,000 square meters. You have to build up to almost 100 meters high. But we don't know what's going to be in there. So you have to do that. You have to come up with an idea of what's going to be there. So that's the situation. That's the moment we have to think and without any research, we come up with the programs. And also at the same time, you have to develop into from the schematic to the phase of a construction documents. At the same time, within a very short time, you have to land it physically in a place. So this is a several project I do on the, that's a few years after my science museum. So I complete several big projects in Nansha. So including some of the interior, like the lower part is a bookstore. You can see I work across a lot of scales at that time. And, but it's just a moment. After I finish my project, the World Trade Center project, the high-rise apartment building. So I come to a point I have to rethink my practice, because even though it's a very ideal position for me, just fresh out of a school, I have this opportunity to do this, but it's totally very exhausted because you are really the single-handed without any help. So you have to design the program, so you are all-rounded person. So somehow I can imagine how the people, to work, to live and work on that building, in order to come up with programs. And then you have to execute it, the project, and then has to be professionally sound project landed on that position. So basically, at that time, I think I'm just building the utopia out of middle nowhere, because this is the image you can see. So it's a lot of my building is isolated in the middle of the agriculture field. It's without any connections and without any sense of urbanity. So I conclude I just think that it's the moment for me to move on, because I have so many puzzles and questions about what the architecture is about. You're making a lot of buildings, but what's this building for? And then what's the building is like it's you plant it in the middle of the agriculture land. So what's the end of the story? So it's not appreciated by the people, and then not forming a city. So so it's the moment I start to question my practice, and so I conclude my almost 7 or 8 years my Nansha practice in the 2005 and the triennial, the Guangzhou triennial. So you see in this image, I put all my 8 years efforts to put into the map of Nansha, just to show my all these years or my the outcome of my practice. But do I have make really the new city, or is it just I just planning the buildings? So this is really the question for me. So I just reaching a moment, as what I said. So it's kind of it's a process of urbanization for Nansha, but if you are understanding what's the city or what's the really urbanism is about, what's the relationship with the people, and the people live there and work there. So it's really the moment I've been very exhausted. So I decided I have to go back to the US. I want to go to further my knowledge, to understanding the relationship with people, my architecture, and the city or the future city. So I want to find out the relationship.
Tool for creating stunning videos.
Pardon me? Hello? Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes. And so it's a moment. So I went back to study. It's my doctorate degree actually is about the urban studies. So it's why I said I try to understand architecture and my practice from the social aspects, and from the not only from the spatial. It's a more seeking the relationship, how our architecture space in relationship with urban life or the public life. So right after my DDAS study, coming back, I started to move my office from Nansha to Shenzhen. So that's where I am, yeah, in Shenzhen. So Shenzhen actually, to me, is addressed very different from Nansha, from my early practicing place. So it's a very high dense city and very dynamic. If I would say my Nansha few years is very slow because it's the building by building, without any infrastructure, without a lot of output, the input from the greater communities. But Shenzhen is totally a different story. So I'm processing myself at that time because I try to understand a different part of the Pearl River Delta, because even though it's 1 hour apart from Nansha and the Shenzhen, but Shenzhen is a totally different place. So it's a city next to Hong Kong. That's why I dress on my this scheme. So it's a pilot experimental city actually address from central government in the early in the late 70s. So this year is last year it was a 40 years birthday. So this is a city. It's very new. The same as Nansha. It's a city developed from a fishing village, but it's basically master planned according to kind of a contemporary city. That kind of idea is totally driven. It's totally infrastructure, transportation, planning driven city. So everything is oriented by the efficiency of the development. So you will see all the road, it's kind of it's very large scale, and everything is planned from the top down. So in the 1986, you see the master plan was a planning by the 3 very major road from the all the way from the to the west to the east. So it's a very simple linear city, but just based on this very the modern the efficiency driven plan. So within the 40 years, it's already from the 1986 is the city is the plan for the 1 million population, but instead now it's already more than 20 million. So it's by the 2018. This is the city already quickly from the 30,000 the population to the 20 million people. So this is a different version of the urbanization in the Pearl River Delta, as kind of a mirror. I should say the mirror image as a Nansha, so it's very slowly coming up a city, but haven't really found any that kind of concept, how the city work, not only based on the architecture, but Shenzhen is very different. It's 1540 years, it's already developed. It's a very high density city. So so this is the situation I confront, have my practice. So where's my position and where's my where my practice has to be situated in this. So understand the urbanism, it become a very important part of the the point of my departure for my practice. So because to me, city is a very, it's a refreshing. It's a very, so every day is new. It's everybody is, it's a very, how to say, it's very real. But Nansha to me is a very totally different story. It's not very real. It's very, the architect, single-handed driven city. But Shenzhen is different. So I want to understand more what the city has been bring to me as the point of a departure for my architecture practice. For now, so I have to address for my early experience, I work with a RAM on the Guangdong Time Art Museum. I'm very quickly to go through my early architects, the projects have an impact on me. So it's a very interesting in the early 2000 so I have a opportunity to work with RAM on these time art museums in Guangzhou. This is a very old project, but that's very important to me, and still have a very strong impact on my these days. Is the way how to bring different kind of urbanism and public programs into the private development, and I think that this is a very interesting idea, and to me. For example, so the Time Museum, it was a very, how to say, it's a very typical kind of a high-rise gated communities, very luxury apartment buildings. But the REM at the time, he's thinking about, he has a very strong argument about the private developers, development over then. And but without any kind of a public sharing in exchange, that kind of a participation. So he questioned about this, and so he used this Time Museum from the very celebrated and very prestigious that kind of programs, that kind of the museum into this everyday housing. The community. So it seems he put into the museum programs and breaking down through their the function, and then this function related to different shape of space and reinserting into this private housing development. To me, this is a very refreshing way or methodology to do the design. So architecture program is no longer is that is only volume. It can break it down according to the needed or according to the relevant space, and then breaking down and reinsert and become their life itself. So you will see the only the 3,000 square meters of museum they can bring in into a different part of the buildings. So you will see that the entries on the ground, and then he used we insert the new elevator to the top. So we added the big the gallery space on the top. But it seems to come across so many the typical floors, and so to me, architecture is an architecture. Is no longer have that kind of very significant presence. What I mean is they really melded into the community, and also they adapted to the specific situation or location, and then to but together they still is the community museum in order to be appreciated to the everyday life, the people's everyday life there, and but it's but this is a very, to me, is kind of a revolutionary approach to have a public programs into the private development. So you will see they will cross boundary about how the fire issues has to be confronted, and then how the at the opening day, the people they have to waiting and for hours for the elevator to go to the top, but even from the very crowded opening day to the very quiet every day, so the community people can share every day. They can go back to their home to detour to this museum to appreciate the art shows. So very quickly, I think that the Time Museum is no longer. What I mean is the people go there for weekends or only on the special day, but it already is become a community public space. So they are there for 24 hours. And people can also use this museum space to appreciate the larger cityscape. So this is a project, even though it's already almost 15 years ago, huh? But this project addressed me, architecture could be resulting on different forms according to the very specific understanding about the context about the community or the specific programs. It's a very, could be a very dynamic, interchangeable that kind of project. So so to me, understanding urbanism, how the architecture could have opportunity to change into different forms of a space. So I put into this because when I was teaching in the COHK, I study about, I have to learn where the urban design coming about, but it's very important in 1956 when this pedagogy started coming in, and at GSD, Louis Search addressed the urban design condition and affirmed the interdisciplinary collaboration. Huh? He come across a lot of keywords, have a very strong impact on me, and so urban design is ever-changing conditions for us to reinvest, reobserve, reinvest, and come up a different kind of strategy for the way we address our architecture. So when I moved to Shenzhen, I don't have any projects, so it's a very risky decision for me. But I take this opportunity for any project. I use this period of time, and even including my teaching, I want to go around the community, the Pearl River Delta, try to understand the city, the real cities in this region, and understand their history. Try to understand what they are coming from. And so you see, for the past my 10 years in my Chinese university, I brought the students from the East Bank to all the way to the West Bank, and based on the different projects and try to understand, use the design as the way to understand the city and understand the urbanism, how it works in the community. So I developed a method because that I think is very important, because during my DDS study, my committee chair, Margaret Crawford, he told me, I think it's like an urban designer, you should be like a detective. So you have to do a lot of field works. You understand the city through your walking, and then you find the important part of the city could have an impact or have the hint for the future of your architecture practice. So I think I use this methodology. Actually, I think I still consider that's very important methodology for me to start a project. So I go around the city and I understand the city, and then to find out the relationship, and then that's the way I want to keep it. So this is probably work more on the urban regeneration, the project, because as a city have a long history. And then for the city, it seems to have no history like a Shenzhen. I try to understand what the really space has been, could be developed through time. But basically, infrastructure is a very important part to connect it, the present and the future and the everyday life. So this is the project I do it in the 2012. Also, the year before, I have a real architecture project landed, concluding somehow my understanding about the urbanism in the city. And then understand how the infrastructure work in the city, in spatially and also socially, and also what's the opportunity for the architects and able to utilize every piece of opportunity or every piece of a space in order to serve or work for the people. And I think even though this is everything is abstract kind of study during the period from 2008 and 2013, but that 5 years is very important 5 years to me to use the competition, use my teaching, and use my urban study research project to understand my future architecture practice could be departed from where. So it's mainly these 5 years to set up a position for me. So I'm ready to take off to my second phase of architecture practice. So through this 5 years research around the region, I come to very important keywords for me to my practice. So time is very important. So even though in China, everything happens so quickly, develops so quickly. So you can, as Ran Kuhao said, you can create a new identity every day, every Monday morning. So because you can ignore the history. So, but to me, history and time is very important. So they form the layers of your life, and they should have a physical presence in the space, in the everyday life. So time to me is very important to address, and the locality I think is very important to me as well. For all this year was in Shenzhen. Shenzhen actually is in the southern China, but was planned as the Western, the modern planning, that kind of idea, but also a lot of people is a migrant from the north. So to me, Shenzhen, even though located in the south, but it's not the southern city, because they don't have a certain kind of architectural or responding for the any locality issues and even the weather conditions. So for me, my practice address the south, address the kind of local conditions is very important. And then again, also to me, understanding how the public life has been oriented in the city and how to address in architecturally is very important as well. So Noli map actually give me the kind of idea how extended the public life from the street all the way to the private, even the private buildings. Even the so the city is no longer have a very clear boundary, from the interior or the exterior, but it could be the flow of the public life. So at that point, I just think about my architecture is no longer is isolated, have that kind of a boundary, interior and exterior. They should be open and should be part of the public life in the city. So urban design is very important for me, to understanding where my architecture could be oriented, and also is the urbanism should be the end of my goal. My architecture should be appreciated by the people living in that city. So so it's a basic. At that time I start to dress a little bit why I have been interested in spatially. So quickly I have an opportunity in the 2013 on the Shenzhen Biennial. I got my first project after my Nansha experience is a 12 almost a 1,200 square meters entry building in a circle. So I will this is not my which is also the quite an old project. But at that time, so I started to increase my understanding about the time about the history of the place, and also and then the locality, the weather conditions, the green space, what that means to the space, and also certain kind of public, to how to address the public people to come here, even though it's a private building, to come across this building in order to reaching their own destination. So, so this is the first project after all the years I doing the research, maybe and kind of in my coming back statement, again, as an architect, even though I got a doctorate degree at the time. And later on, the one single building, the idea about the urbanism, about the public space, about the different time, and is the scale about this understanding expanded on this 2015, my Datong Flower Factory as a biennial major exhibition site venue. And so later on, I have a very quick, maybe I will talk a little bit more about how the idea have been worked in this project. And even though from understanding about the scale of the block, and then expanding the way how we work as in the block with a group of architects, or use this project as the curator. So to curate not only the architecture making, but also to curate the different kind of events, even to invite the different disciplinary people like artists to work together with us on the different scale of urban projects. So in 2017, I have an opportunity to work on this village in order to realize my dream as use architecture as the urban curator. And this is just on and on. So how a lot of my urban understanding, the locality, about the site-specific issues, and come back about the time, about the history, all come around the different project, come across for my project. So every project is very different because every project have a different questions based on my investigation, the site investigation and research. But in the end, I think the ground floor, is always very important to the public life, because that's most direct space your architecture has to confront or interact with the people. So we develop a certain kind of urban design methodology also, the language or the tools we try to address from the very beginning. And so this is the Yongqing found in Guangzhou. And so, one thing in China is because everything happens so fast, you have to use the project as your opportunity to complete the whole cycle of the architecture making, which means you have to put your research, you have to your field operation, your field investigation, and then to come up with the design, and also have to land it within a very very short period of time. So it's again, even though you see in the I only have 7 years, I already complete so many projects, because I think I have to thankful to a certain kind of my 5 years of no project period of time of a research about the city. to come up with a certain kind of a clear methodology to proceed the project. So you can very quickly to adapt the role based on the each specific project. At the same time, I think the urbanism, it is the way you understand the city, and then as the point of a departure to land your architecture projects. But also architecture is about making. It's a very tectonically. You also has to be has a fine architect. So I think we have to able to do with the two scales of project, which means it's the urban scale from the one end. So and then the other end is your tectonic making. You have to deal with a very everyday details, the materials and structures, and then how to react and respond to specific sites. So I think these two ends of architecture making, to me, both equal important. So so you will see at the meantime, I also have some small project. It's not in the city, but also I have a very specific site. But I use the idea about how to connect it somehow these both ends into my architecture making. Maybe some keyword to me is the experience, because the experience can happen to in any level. So the experience happen on the urban level, but also can be an architecture, interior space level, and also the experience you can have a dialogue with your site, and how this dialogue is able to develop into your architecture space through the tectonic making. So I'm very persistent to still try to use a very basic architecture methodology. Use the models, use the very conceptual model to develop into a more tangible models, and then certain kind of rendering, and in the end also have of course the mock-up and address in the specific site. So I enjoy this process. So this is a project in the Nanjing, is we call the folded house. So it's a project still not finished. You will see, because before they still have no people occupy yet. But anyway, so the reason I put this project in a lot of my urban design and architecture project is to address also the tectonic making. The end is still is our ultimate goal to make a defined architecture. And again, is we got a lot of projects in the through the competition. I designed the wedding hall in the 2017. That's the winning about the urban competition, from the landscape all the way to the architecture. And so in the equal time for 8 years in Shenzhen, from start of my 2013, I have my first landing project. So we have already developed a series of projects in Shenzhen across different districts. And so again, I'm not going to talk further about this project because I already addressed earlier. But to me, why again to say this is a 13 project, 2013, this entrance building to me is a very important start, is to how to use the urban point of view, and in the end to land it in the architecture. So tectonically, you still have to able to solve the problems about how the future to meet the past, and how the new architecture and new structures is able to plant in the old part of the space and deal with the old foundation. So in the end, this still is an everyday architecture practice, and no matter where you are, where you start, you know. So it's a very interesting project for us to have to within the 3 months we have to you know, through the idea from the old building, you reach up a new box through certain you know, you have to deal with a lot of structural issues. And then, but at the end of the day, we are able to deliver a project. To me, it's not a very simple architecture. It could be it's kind of installation. So, but it seems they respond different part of the issues have been very interesting in about the time, about from the road to come through the roof of the existing building to coming into the courtyard. And also, as a client we have to build a new area in order to accommodate new programs. So this is no longer it's a one single building. It could be a multiple buildings, but definitely is a public entry project. So so this is just at the time we published our book, and also it was showing on the Archi Daily. They called this entry building as a floating pavilions. So, but this kind of understanding and practice was why I said at expanding to many years. Different scales of projects. So the ideas about introduce different form of experience into your architecture making, into this kind of a cluster of buildings within one block is also keep coming back. So why I'm saying the ground floor is very important to open to the city. Is important, and also certain kind of facade is also the way to have a dialogue to the community, and this kind of dialogue is not only just it's kind of a aesthetic experience, but also you have to solve the issues about the fire regulation. They use part of the staircases, the fire staircase, as a part of your expressive element on the elevation. So it's a lot of layers of understanding and how the final form has been landed. You have to, at the meantime, solve a lot of regulation issues, and also your own egos, and also the conclusion of your urban investigation. So all these kind of things to come together in the end have their actual contribution to the final form. Milton, hello, yes. Sorry, I think I have I already have 45 minutes already. So so this is a project. It is go through. It's a building by building. I even invited my COEK, my colleague, to deliver urban form ideas to this project, but unfortunately, as many of other project in my so the cycle of the architecture, the life is so short. For the biennial 2015, all these projects you know, they have to giving away for the future development. And hold on. And So so they even have to be somehow they demolished to giving away to the future developments, like this UABB project in 2015. You know, so this is the photos we took last year. So half of the site already demolished to giving away for the future urban development. So this is really the reality we have to confront and has to be accepted in our everyday practice. But that's the way it is. So the important for us is to use that kind of a short life to address certain kind of, I think, it's important issues to the city through our design. So that's why try to you know that's the kind of a driven motivation for our practice. And you will see we use this opportunity, even the temporary, really the time, very short time project, we still want to develop into certain kind of a space for people to experience. For example, the Beijing Design Week, also back to 3 years ago, to use the courtyard and to develop the idea as a children's playground, and by working also with fashion designers. And so it's within the 1 month, this courtyard is able to transform into a community playground as a soft playground, at the same time as an exhibition space for the fashion designers. And as I earlier said about as architects, you are not only to making certain kind of physical space, and but also your way could be an urban curator, and to introduce the greater experience to your projects. So in the 2017, the UABB, I have a chief architect for this village. I'm not going to have a big expanding this topic, this project, but this the project I just want to say the architect is again to bring back my earlier Nansha experience. You are not only is making the person to make an architecture space, a physical space, but also you are able to be a program curators, but based on your research. So from this project, I have to go to select the sites as a village, and then like the Damesa village. At the same time, we have to do a lot of groundwork, go through the space to identify the important everyday public space and even the public street, and then to come up with a project. So within the biennial time, we can upgrade some of the some of the public spaces, but also select the 10 buildings, but also to upgrade the 500 meters of a street in the village. So that's become our project. So I'm the curator to address this kind of project. And then we also invited a different group of architects and our artists to work together for this project. So we have a very dynamic process of working. Everyone have a contribute to their the models. We have to make a presentation to the government, and then to again go back to every single building. We have to back to our core of architecture making, to do a lot of models, and to make as really is the project growing out of this specific sites. and react to different outside condition. And also we have to work with artists on this space, and in order to modify their according to their needs, to modify our space. And you will see in the end this center project is not only the architecture itself or building itself, but also is a crossroad from one street to the other street, and then giving the complete space for the artist to work on the ground floor at the meantime as a showroom to the community. So I think the form we try to address or landed in the end is really based on the process of the different phases of our work, from the really the size, the investigation, come up with a strategy, and this strategy has to develop into a physical spatial strategy, and then you go through the set of architecture making, models, drawings, and selection of the final concept and build. And I think through this, from the very beginning of the research to end the site, we can guarantee somehow they should be right to the place. So it's not the top-down process of a design, but it's a double check from the from the urban scale to all the way to the village fabric. So the bottom-up process understand how the specific sites inspire you. So you will see the new building has become part, once they landed, as already part of the community and a part of the urban fabric. And so it's again, within the 4 months, these projects were already completed on the site. So 4 architects work for the 10 buildings and complete in this and ready for the biennial. And so let me see. So Milton, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I spent so much time already. So how much time I have already gone?
I think it'd be great if you if we could open up for questions, and then if you could continue to move through projects to answer some of those questions, maybe. Okay, so shall I answer some questions? Yeah. Sure, but first I'm going to introduce Jen Toy, who's a lecturer here at USC, who's going to moderate our question and answer period. So I'm going to turn it over to her, Professor Toy. Okay. And I'm sorry because yeah, hi Jen. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I really appreciate how you shared that work through your individual progression as a practitioner, thinking about this incredible opportunity that you had to start in Nansha and just experiment, and then how that really helped you to become more critical. I loved the phrase that you put up there, urbanization without urbanism, and then how that was really the impetus to go back to school and think more about the social fabric of cities as well as the spatial fabric. So thank you. I think that was a really interesting way to share your work. So I guess there's some questions coming in, and please add them to the Q&A. I'll start with a question from myself, which is to just go back to that initial work that you did in Nansha. And I'm curious, on reflecting on that work now, has urbanism happened, despite the fact that when you left it, it was sort of these buildings sitting within a very rural agrarian context?
Yeah. So, so sorry, I tried to get the question. So your question is, so what's happening after I left?
I'm just curious if urbanism, happened in some way, shape, or form after that initial period of urbanization.
Well, I think I still think about Nansha situation is very special. I take it it's not a very positive example. It's I mean it's quite negative somehow. It's not the good way, because when the time is an issue, and so the people or the developer probably don't want to, they only use the architecture to address that the time, because the people can within the very short time to see the architecture is there or building is there. But most of people don't care about what it's really functioning or not. I'm not sure I answer your question, but I think they lacking certain kind of importance to the infrastructure issues. What I mean, the infrastructure issue is the large context, how it make the things connected from one place to the other, or from the people to the space, or the community to another community. So I think that this is the part they should work from the very beginning, rather than ignore this, the most important part of the work, and then to bringing in the buildings quickly. I think that this is the typical way of a development in China these days. Not only happening in Nansha, but Nansha have another issues. The investment probably is not have enough money to put into it, make everything happening at the same time. But Shenzhen does. Shenzhen has a lot of money, so they are able to utilize the the infrastructure planning and architecture at the same time. But they are definitely lacking the other dimension to understand the city, how the city work. Actually, is the social planning and the ecologically planning. So that's the dimensions they are lacking. So do I answer your question? I am.
Yes, no, I think it's yes, that was great. Thank you. Yeah. Just to kind of transition into the Shenzhen work and get into some of the questions that and the larger Pearl River Delta work, the questions that are in the Q&A. I wanted to ask, so in your view, is Shenzhen a city where that architecture and urbanism and infrastructure is happening kind of all together at the same time? Or, you walked us through how the infrastructure, there was a plan in the 80s and it has developed since then, but it's, the population has way surpassed what that original plan accounted for. And so I'm just curious, in terms of practicing in that context, is it sort of this now way of thinking about the city as something new, but something old, and also something sort of simultaneously, working on at multiple scales at the same time?
Right. So actually, I have prepared so many projects, so I haven't really get into my second part, but your questions really is about my second part of my practice and within these 2 years. So it is why when the infrastructure planning and architecture, urban design all come together is the way we work today in Shenzhen. So especially, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So, after the rough development in the first decades, Shenzhen already come up with so many buildings, so many area footage, but they are, to me, they don't have urbanism. So what I mean is they haven't really used the opportunity to the architecture making to be introduced by certain kind of social aspects, the public space perspective or ecological perspective. So we use our architecture. Use my projects as the way to address that importance in the past few years. For example, the water treatment plants and also the pedestrian, just a general connection of the bridge. Seems this is very functioning, especially the treatment plants project is a functioning engineering, that type of infrastructure, right? It's a water shortage. But we can, as architect, and we can do more than that. So there, to me, is not only the infrastructure, but also could be a public space. So we have to, at the same time, this address another issue is a lot of these kind of infrastructure projects occupy a very important part of the city, which means they utilize a lot of land. Yeah, for example, this kind of project, they have a lot of land to occupy in order to build this sewage, but are not to be perceived by the people. So they don't understand why the stupid kind of engineer water plant sewage with a very filthy smells into their neighborhood. So, but we can do more than that. So a lot of project these few years is about how to utilize this engineering part of architecture into the public space. The people is able to come here to understand how the everyday the treatments have been processed, and then they get the education or even the exhibition to learn something over here. At the same time, this kind of a sewage plant project could be a public space for people to come around here, go to the top, and then to seeing the city in the grand view. Normally, it's not the experience they had in their home or their everyday life. And so the very much this kind of engineering infrastructure could be part of the public space, and to have a very to orchestra some very important dialogue, so active exchange dialogue with the city itself. So so I don't want to say infrastructure, architecture, urban design, and in a very abstract way. But I see this integration or understanding about how all these things could work, even on the scale of architecture projects. You still can have that kind of positive contribution to the city. So that's what we can do as architects over here. So we are not is a big operator, you know. So do I answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
In
So
your experience, to what degree are you pushing for, you know, the addition of this publicly oriented program into your commissions? You know, when you're commissioned to do a water treatment plant, is this kind of like interface and connection with the city part of that commission, or is this something that you are really working hard to fight for?
I think I really appreciate the time we are at in China, especially in Shenzhen at the moment, because everyone has, especially the architect, you have opportunity to really to be your own programmer, own curator, and you can always introduce certain kind of additional idea and into your piece of architecture making. Because no one actually in China still in the very rough, I mean, the urban development, nobody will tell you, they will tell you, that's it, this is my infant, the sewage plant, but I want to do something. The client would tell me that maybe you should open some of the place to some public, people can come here to experience. But you have to secure my safety of my my factory processing the water. So they will tell you just one sentence like that, but they leave you the rest of them for you to develop. So this is the typical situation we have to confront every day as an architect in over here. So how we can respond within a very short time, use your architecture as your statement. So to me, the research is very important. You kind of site investigation research is always as your parallel lines of your architecture making. So at the end, all this tool can come together and deliver certain kind of piece of architecture is able to responding the site responding the specific part of function, also the what the client has been addressed. So it's a I don't know, it's the intensity of the working method. It's I think it's even more important than the making itself. But I'm not sure I answer your question, but yeah, that's the situation and condition we are at every day.
Sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and ask a couple of the questions in the Q&A. Rudy
Right.
Jacobs wanted to know that the project that you did with REM that has the art gallery space on the top, is there a program at the ground level as well?
There's an entrance on the ground floor, so it's only small part of the entry is the entrance. So, but the major, the 2/3 of the area actually is on the top of the roof. So that's why the fire regulations come to play a very important role in the process. And I remember the RAM only come twice, you know, within this whole year project, because at the beginning, they try to see the site and then to give our idea what could be there, right? And then the second part, the second time, and then the last time he come is a meeting with a planning bureau, the head of a planning bureau, to say even though it violates the fire regulation, you know, we only have a one staircase and then the one elevator, but that this project is so important, so has to be a lot of regulation have to give away for this idea. I think that I remember very clearly about that time. But if the things happen today, it wouldn't be happening. You know, it's Ram is a special person, so at that time they can persuade a lot of the bureaucratic officials able to do something like that. Yeah.
This is kind of on the similar topic from Mina Chow. It sounds like some of Rem's ideas about putting public programs far above the ground plane might not work as well in parts of China, for example, in more rural parts. What other Western design strategies had a surprising impact in your urban design projects? That impact could be, you know, a success or a failure from your perspective.
I think the Time Museum project I addressed today address a certain kind of two issues. Socially, they take a challenge about how the public realm can tackle certain kind of private how to say properties. So how the public and private can meet to cross the boundary, through the one single project. So this is really why I earlier said is a revolutionary, because in China's land use rule of the land use, so housing is a housing, the public program, public land use is a public. So private and then public have a very defined line in between. So, but the museum, this project is the first time they broke through this kind of boundary. So you put the public program into the private development. So somehow, what I mean is we always are seeking certain kind of in-between space. Yeah, we always use the in-between space as an experiment to testing how the private can solving, or how the public is able to invade, I use the invade, but in the positive way, to the private life, what I mean the private properties. So we are, for all these years, the in-between zone between private and public always is our the zone of interest for us to develop. So so this has have a very great impact on our for our infrastructure project as well, because the infrastructure project also have certain kind of safety issues for secure the production of infrastructure. But at the same time, are they able to open to the public, for the public people to understand how they are producing, how and also this is a place for them to experience. So I think an in-between zone is always our space to testing a lot of new ideas, and the ideas to break through, use the public realm to break through the private or the safety or the security of the kind of production issues. So what I mean, in that point of view, is important influence. The second important influence resulting from that project is the architecture making, the core of architecture making. So architecture is no longer is objects define the interior and exterior, because they could be very flexible in certain way, and according to the specific programs or you're coming up, or you curated, or also based on the very specific sites they inspire you. So architecture could be shaped and reshaped, not according to the rule of the interior and exterior and very clear boundary, but also the urbanism and different idea for making of the programs is able to give you a new concept of a form to this project. So the architecture may become a shapeless, or could be have a shape without a clear boundary. So two levels of inspiration come from this Time Museum. So you can see my later, a lot of projects have no, you cannot really understand to be a name as a NODE project, but could be happening anywhere but it has to be growing out of that specific site and specific issues and questions. Yeah.
As someone who has, you know, been educated both in China but also abroad, and has had an opportunity to live in many different cities, and also practice in many different cities, I was curious about lessons that you might pass along to students about applying Western design ideas. This is part of Mina Chow's second part of her question, or more broadly, urban design lessons from other parts of the world to your practice in China.
This is a good question. I think that China, on the very special phase of development for the past decades, because they try to be really, they want to be modernized very fast and significantly within a very short time. So in order to do that, so they have to transform into themselves overnight, you know, spatially as well. So, but so the things, are we ready for that professionally, or our as a our, I mean, the knowledgeably, we are ready for that kind of overnight transformation? My answer definitely is not. So that's why everything happening so fast is based on your own knowledge, or the already pre-given knowledge, and then you quickly transform into a space or projects landing over here physically. But my education in the US give me the more important than the form making actually is a methodology driven type of a process of making that's more important than the form making process. So I mean, you always have to you always have to able to adapt to new situation, and but in order to ignore the new situation, use your own knowledge, you have to quickly to bridging over the new mission, new project at the same time on the specificity of the project. So I mean, so you have to keep refreshing. You always have to keep what's the way to make it work better. So the research is important, and also the way to work is very important. So it's in the end, the open platforms to every single project to me is a way to start, because every project right now in China is have that kind of complexity of issues or demands, and as architects, within our own knowledge of being architecture making is no longer meet that complexity. So somehow I used, of course, my teaching and also the workshop to work on different disciplinaries, professionals, and as at the beginning of the project, in order to define the real questions, and then my architecture education, that kind of my architecture as a profession is coming in later on to leading that kind of a physical architecture making process. But at the beginning, I think it's important to work with a lot of different kinds of people and to address the real questions. So addressing question is still is a very important starting point for us. So how they're going to addressing the real questions, that's the issues these days. So the methodology, method, the way to work is to ensure later on our design have more have a reasonable outcome. Yeah. I'm not sure is I address.
Yes, I think you did in your own way, which was
great. Okay. Yeah.
There's another question from. Do we have time for one or two more questions?
Just one.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I can combine these two. This is from Elaine Kwong and Shannon Dundum. I think they're both interested in kind of your future and what your vision is for your practice in the next 5 to 10 years, in to stay in Shenzhen or to broaden your work more broadly in China, and to maybe frame that in the context of this transition that China's going through in terms of moving from very collectivist-driven philosophies, and that has impacts on all different aspects of life, to more individualized ways of living, and wondering how you want to address that in your practice moving forward. I liked how you talked about your different phases of your development. So what's next for 2021 to 2020, 2030?
Yeah, well, this is a very philosophical question. I think, I have every 10 years is kind of, because in China we have a 5-year plan, right? Every 5 years you have to coming back to modify your previous goal, and then to see what's the future is going to be landed. And but as an architect, the 5 year is a little too short. So I always address my practice on the 10 years phase. So you see, last year, I moved here in 2009 and 10. Yeah, and then the last year is 10 years. So I decided to move my office, even from the same community, from the north to the south. I think I want to make a change physically as well. My home is also I moved, and my research interest also have been shifting. And see, my first 10 years was understand the region, understand the issues, the real issues happening in the region, how our as a practice also. And so I use my architecture making as responding for that 10 years phase of research and questions. And then these recent 2 years, I start to realize that, and we can make things even smaller, but address the issues even broader. For example, the infrastructure projects we had. So the infrastructure projects is could be from the several hundred square meters larger to like 10,000 square meters, right? But they address a broader issues of complexity happening in the city, because the land is no longer, we don't have much land left, right? So, but so when the one project occupy that take apart that piece of land, you should have a greater impact on the urban life. So we're thinking about that is very important for us to address for the future. So how to utilize every single piece of a public land for open to the bigger public use. So, we used our infrastructure project as our way to enter this, to answer or responding for this land, for these issues. So, so in order to do that, because I think that always research is always in advance of practice, because we think about 5 or 10 years. So for example, we did the water infrastructure like 2010, but only happening 3 years ago, we have the real infrastructure project. So it takes 5 years to 7 years from the research to the real project. So currently, we still enjoy the process of making that small infrastructure project into the public building. At the same time, I have my lab now. I also was shifting the Hong Kong from the Chinese university to the Shenzhen University. The reason for that, the Shenzhen University gave me the innovative lab. So it's able to address the future issues in the Pearl River Delta. So to me, the future is about ecological understanding about the region life. I think that's because we are over, how to say, we are too spoiled in the past decades, because you think about land has, we own a lot of land. We can do whatever we want, but it's not. We have so many pollution idea, the global warming idea, the problems. We have so many that kind of nature disasters every year. It's getting crucial. And how the architects are able to respond to these issues, use our design to be balanced about the future and the current critical conditions. So I think that that's the part we have to have our research input. So we think about, we still use the region to from geographically, humanistically, or this is too big a word, but ecologically, to understand from the beginning of our architecture, and then to use our architecture at the end of making, how to linking all these two together. So I will use my lab to do my future research. So I should be just like one step at a time, but I'm sure in 5 years or 10 years, we have a different form of architecture will come out. I'm sure about that. Yeah. Am I clear? Yeah. Hello? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Toy and Doreen Heng Liu. You've given us a lot to think about, and I think just a very, quite a lot of ground and territory that you covered, both in your research and practice and thinking, and it's just very rich. And we look forward, when we can, to have you back with us physically in LA to interact with our students, and look forward to visiting you in Shenzhen. We have programs that bring students to China as well. So we look forward to staying in touch. It's very, very enriching to have your thoughts this evening. So thank you. Yeah,
thank you, Milton. But thank you, Jim. But I think I have to say, in the future, my lab at the Shenzhen University, we operate a lot of workshop, international workshop, collaborated different universities in the world. So I really would like to have a USC. It could be we're able to find some project in the region. We can work together.
That would be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so generous. We will definitely follow up on that and definitely appreciate it. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jen. Milton.